Welcome to the Chaos Sector. In the previous episode, we mentioned how Kaylee's family stayed in Moscow. Now there is a correction. One viewer claimed they stay in Jack's hometown of Kordealin. Well, it appears they stay in Rathdrum, which is close to 2 hours from Moscow. It appears Maddie's parents actually reside there, which is a bit closer in travel distance. Ethan's parents apparently reside in Washington, and Xana's parents reside in Post Falls, Idaho. I'm thinking her original place of residence in Arizona was changed to Post Falls due to, parental issues. I know that theory we presented led to that 18-wheeler flying down the road at a high speed. We apologize for that. But the core of that analysis remains the same. Those family members knew about the tragedy before the 911 call was made. Listen, I don't want people to think we're attacking the family, by no means. But from an investigative lens, which you kind of take the wheel of a detective, we have to acknowledge these important elements. I would estimate that from 4 a.m. to about 8 a.m. is when the initial tragic news had spread. The families wouldn't claim to get that news earlier than when the bodies were discovered, because they would end up in a tight spot like Haiti was in, or is in. But we know more than likely those families received that emergency phone call from that very 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. time frame. Especially the parents, they are up early in the morning, perhaps as early as 5 a.m. due to work. We have to be honest here. A phone call was made, they are notified about the tragedy and simply can't make a decision on what to do. Because unfortunately, they knew the associations that those housemates had were more than likely the cause, which also unfortunately would lead to a very large ripple effect throughout Moscow. Think about it. I know many do not accept WSU Kim's accounts, but I think she disinformed the public, meaning she told some truths, but from a place of deception. Her claims have Bethany and Dylan awake and aware of the murders. And to justify that WSU Kim told some truths, guess who came out and also stated those housemates were awake and aware? The mainstream media, who would have to obtain this information from the authorities in regards to text messages. Also, WSU Kim claims that both Bethany and Dylan knew the individuals at the home, right? And Kaylee's mother stated, I think it was someone they knew. So all of these statements and information prove that the families at least knew of the likely suspects, perhaps not specifically. And since this would be more than likely from within the town or even the college circle, they simply can't do anything due to that large ripple effect. And that's pretty much the point. But on to more recent updates. They demolished the home. Yeah, that's what everyone is talking about right now. The families didn't want that, and yet they still did it. Why? Why would they demolish the home, despite the families pleading for it to stay? To be honest, I think it was a distraction. Can't speak for my other colleagues here, but I'm not getting into that. It seems forced, like a symbolic message. Wait a minute, I'm not getting into it. Although many think it's important, I found something that may be more important than that. In fact, it is. Remember I stated that there was something that caught my attention in the previous episode? Well, let's get into it. We travel back to the grub truck footage. Shout out to, I believe the creator is called Neek Peaks or something like that. They spotted what they claimed to be a drug transaction or traffic. Immediately, my eyes became glued to that segment of the footage. It was done in the typical covert manner, sleight of hand, like the classic shady handshake. The perpetrators is our chunky guy with the tan sweater and a young lady in a black university sweater. Yeah, he's spoken out publicly, but you might be in a bit of trouble, buddy. Because if this is what Neek Peaks claims it is, which it looks like, this only reaffirms our theory that the murders were drug-related. Let's dig, shall we? The chunky guy is standing near the girls with Showalter as well. A young lady walks up and passes him. Now this is where Neek Peaks claims the exchange was made between these two. That's what it looks like, but it's so swift you can't really tell at face value. But since we all know how clever drug dealers have become with their exchanges, we examine a bit deeper. Okay, the body language and movement of the chunky guy, to me, indicates there was an exchange. When the young lady is passing, he drops his arms, which he previously had his arms to his chest. It was timed perfectly, as his right arm comes down right when she passes and the exchange is made. After the exchange, he moves to the left side near the truck. The young lady goes to talk to Kaylee, and then the chunky guy uses the shield of his left side facing the camera, while his right side, being his right arm and hand, slides the package into his pocket, but we will zoom in closer to verify what we believe has taken place. Okay, let's see what we have here. Yep, that's what took place, a drug transaction or traffic. Relatively the same, but also different. A drug transaction is someone went and bought the drugs, the young lady in the black sweater, and brought it back to the chunky guy, who would be the buyer. While the other is the young lady trafficked the drugs to the chunky guy, who would be the seller. Either the chunky guy is the buyer or he's the dealer. I don't really care, to be honest. It's the illegal action that's of concern. It doesn't make him a bad person in his heart, but by law, he along with the young lady are criminals. And this criminal activity, which is being carried out with Maddie and Kaylee standing right there, it just makes it more evident of what the motive was. Don't have to remind everyone about the endless count of drug overdoses in that town, especially surrounding the time frame of the housemates' deaths. I'm guessing it was fentanyl, and that, my friends, puts Chunky and Susie, nicknames of course, in the position of, ironically, Bonnie and Clyde. Because if this was sold to another college student and they overdosed, Chunky and Susie distributed that drug to that student, which is fatal. It doesn't matter if they abused the drug itself is fatal, even in small doses. We see the actual trafficking in real time. This is how those college students made extra cash. This basic exchange would provide both of them cash incentives. Think about this for a moment, because when money flows, your morality goes. On average, a fentanyl tablet is about $25 on the street. Of course, it fluctuates. Okay, what if you have 50 tablets ready to be sold? Bingo, you've made $1,250, perhaps in the same day. So at the end of your, work shift, you come home with $1,250 and you have more tabs to sell throughout the week. Then all of a sudden, the entire pharmacy is dumped in your living room. Do you see where this leads? College students would jump off a cliff to get that type of money. It's just too lucrative to pass up for some. That's why Bonnie and Clyde were all over the place, seen on expensive trips, drinking wine, enjoying the finer things in life due to this lucrative, occupation. Chunky and Susie seem like they want to follow their footsteps, to prison. And perhaps this is what got the housemates in trouble. They're going to get you for this, Maddie. I don't know about you, but it sounds like someone made a huge mistake. $1,250 can be multiplied quite fast, my friends, up to the hundreds of thousands. I just broke down how fast that money can grow, and if someone or a group of individuals impact the growth of that profit, it's sad how the world can turn on you in a heartbeat. One minute it's smiling in your face, then the next minute it's hunting you down with anger. We've been looking for actual proof of drug-related activity, and now we have it. And then the pieces start falling into place, because this pulls Bonnie and Clyde into the mix even more. A student even claimed that Bonnie and Clyde were the suppliers in that town. Bonnie knew those housemates, and surely she frequented the, quote, party house with her, quote, party products. This affirms Dot's claims of seeing Bonnie with Dylan later that morning. Ever wondered why Pullman PD released body cam footage of Bonnie's DUI arrest? Oh, it's just a part of the Law and Crime Network's dumbest criminal content. I beg to differ. The reason they released that footage, which was months after the Idaho murders, was because everyone had already connected Bonnie and Clyde to those murders. And as you know, it was nothing more than, wait for it, damage control. And get a load of this. While Bonnie is in custody, she dumps her drugs into the trash bin right in front of the camera, grabs some tissue, reaches down and pulls the drugs out of her, bottom, and places the drugs in the trash bin. She did it in a slick way, of course, but we all spotted it. And if we all spotted that clever move, I'm pretty sure officers spotted that upon reviewing it as well. She's definitely not a rookie. Bonnie knows where to hide drugs in case she is pulled over and even searched. Also, this would mean she had those drugs in that location the entire time. Driving while under the influence, putting her life and other students in danger while hiding drugs in her freaking ass crack, which would be sold to such college students riding along with her. Bonnie obviously was actively selling those drugs during that time frame. She may have been a friend of some of those housemates when they were younger, such as middle school or high school. All of that vanished in the blink of an eye. Why did people come out and attempt to debunk Dot's claims? because the deeper you get into that setting, you see that Koberger is pulled further away from that setting. The DoorDash driver, let's go over all of this again. The DoorDash driver was not identified. The private driver was not who they claimed it was. So that's two individuals who the public has not physically seen. I'm sure they were asked to be interviewed by the mainstream media, right? Friends were interviewed by the mainstream media. Would have liked to have seen the private driver give their accounts of what happened. After all, they claim to have taken the girls home quite often. Seems personal enough to be interviewed. Yet they chose to keep their identities concealed. Well, the suspect had been arrested, right? No need to hide, you're safe, nobody is going to come after you. It's because, in my opinion, the private driver and the DoorDash driver are the same person. The cunning snake, Bonnie. Oh, to keep everyone up to speed, the private driver is not Eric Gower or Grower, because his anonymous interview with the news has him residing in Pullman, staying only 1,200 feet away from Koberger's apartment. Yeah, such a specific number. We broke all of that down. Eric Gower is not only from Moscow but lives there, currently, and an alumni from the University of Idaho. He does provide transportation to students. And this is what made people assume it was him, based on one shady individual's video, I might add. Yet, the private driver states he lives in Pullman, Washington. This eliminates Eric Gower from the equation. This is why the private driver has not been identified. Let's dig into this misdirection. The PCA does have Eric Grower as the private driver in the unredacted edition. But for one, his name is Eric Gower. Second, why would you reveal his identity in the unredacted PCA, but conceal his identity in the second edition if it was about protecting his identity? And of course, Eric Gower is from Moscow, Idaho, yet someone who gave official statements to the news outlets in interviews claims to reside in Pullman, Washington. We checked that Eric Gower does not reside in Pullman and has never resided there. I recall someone leaving a post and saying Eric Gower was the private driver that night, yet I'm not sure who that was, who pretended to be the private driver in those interviews. And we, of course, pointed out that's proof that it wasn't Eric Gower by process of conflicting representation of that private driver. What we had concluded was the individual Eric Grower depicted as the driver in the unredacted PCA had to be an impersonation. They didn't use the correct spelling of his last name, because then you would have everyone trying to communicate with Eric Gower. JLR used Gower's photo and claimed he was the private driver. This JLR individual has been charged with, wait for it, impersonation. We took our 18-wheeler and rumbled down the road on him. It had become very evident he was potentially involved. We suggested that he was the one who spoke to authorities impersonating Eric Gower, even giving those statements in interviews. Come to think about it, it all adds up. He was all over that area during the early days of the investigation. One minute he's in Moscow, the next he's in Pullman, and even traveling to Pennsylvania. He obviously is capable of pulling it off. Impersonation is something he specializes in, such as being a true crime investigator. Okay, let's be nice today. But anywho, when the authorities found out that the real Eric Gower was not the driver, they concealed the identity of the driver. But it was too late. Individuals like JLR had already did the damage. For those who continue to believe it was Gower, once again, he would have been identified in his interviews because at that point everyone would already know who he was. Which brings us back to the question of why Moscow PD decided to conceal the identity after revealing it prior. And then we have the interviews where the so-called private driver lives in Pullman, yet Gower lives in Moscow. But we do know who has frequented Pullman. That's right, Bonnie. What we concluded overall is some male pretended to be the private driver, impersonating Eric Gower, but altered the last name, covering for the real private driver of Bonnie. Yep, that's a lot of fuckery, you understand? Okay, just wanted to keep everyone up to speed on that. Since this drug exchange was made and Bonnie and Clyde are the suppliers in that town, we assume this package is from them. Dot's claims has Dylan, Bonnie, Clyde, an unidentified individual in a hoodie, who could be Showalter to be honest, and a pale-skinned guy with light-colored hair, all standing on the porch, smoking marijuana. Dot even stated she could spot Dylan because she's pretty tall, which she is. But the pale-skinned, light-colored hair individual, now who could this be? Perhaps a ginger-toned hair color and pale skin who was an ex-boyfriend of one of the victims? Dylan, Bonnie and Clyde, perhaps Showalter, and Kaylee's ex all standing outside the home after the murders? Well, looks like we have a group of suspects all in one place. As the saying goes, the suspect will often return to the scene of the crime. For Dylan, well, she never left. Sorry, but I had to take that freebie. But of course, Dot is just seeking attention. Complete and utter lies, right? I don't think so. Showalter can't be confirmed, neither can the ex, but Dot specifically stated she saw Dylan Emma, a black guy, so that's Dylan with Bonnie and Clyde. Because if Bonnie was there, the black guy is more than likely her partner in crime. Now, why would these partners in crime be at this home? Oh, they were close friends with those housemates? Negative. They were involved in the murders. Brings me back to the audio that was so-called debunked, with the guy yelling Bonnie's name, pleading for her to get over there. Remember that? In our analysis of that audio, there was a black guy heard. There was an individual state quote, "Do we have problems here?" And a bunch of yelling throughout. This was slated fake by many. Even the mainstream media came out and stated it was fake. They even claimed to have spoken to the housemates next door about it, who told them that the audio was fake. Now, how exactly can we know they spoke to them? Or better yet, why would anyone believe those next-door neighbors when they clearly won't say anything about what they heard or even witnessed that night? Excuse me, I sense a sneeze coming on damage control. So here's the big question. If that audio was fake, is everyone suggesting that someone faked audio regarding this tragedy? That's just as malicious and evil as the murders, which justifies that it was actually real, which nobody wanted to acknowledge as real, because once again, it changes the setting at the home, and it also has specific people identified in that audio. I think what happened with that audio was not manufactured, rather doctored, meaning the actual audio is real with a few, distractions. For those who always say that audio has been debunked, or Dot has already been debunked, or WSU Kim has already been debunked, if you are debunking all of the information and evidence, then you are essentially covering up the murders just like the conspirators. You have to accept that someone could be telling the truth and question someone who pops up out of nowhere and attempts to debunk that someone. Even the audio of the woman who had visited Jack in a crack, she inquires about the DoorDash driver. Employees describe a girl who had black hair, who somehow placed and picked up the order for Xana, all in one swoop. Many tried to debunk that, claiming it was a guy. The cat jumped out of the bag, my friends. That was in fact Bonnie plotting against Xana. You do realize that this is, once again, you should know by now, damage control. Sometimes the glass is half full, not half empty, I'm rambling a bit, so let's leave it at that. I think we're all on the same page now. But we'll examine more of that grub truck footage, because now, instead of examining Kaylee, Maddie, and Jack, now we have to examine what the hell is truly going on with that entire group of students surrounding them. Because there may be a few smiles and hugs which were not genuine, if you catch my drift. This is the chaos sector.